listen, I had all these plans. I was going to be like, I'm going to be so proactive on BookTube Book Talk. I'm going to be posting all the time. I had all these plans. I've done nothing. I have failed. But you know what? I am coming out of my failure because there's a book I have got to talk about. I have only seen like one or two other people very briefly mention it, and I need more of you all to read this book. Like, I am being so serious. If you don't want to read, if you want to listen to the audiobook, good. The audiobook, French Kiss. It's amazing. I loved it. I read it physically and also already did the audiobook. I'm already like losing my train of thought because I just talking too fast. Anyway, here's the thing. Banned books have been a very popular discussion on TikTok as of recently. Specifically, reading and buying more banned books because you know what? The world is a little scary right now. This is a future banned book. Okay, I read this within the first 5 chapters. I was like, yeah, no, this is going to be on the banned book list so fast. It was a recent release. It came out like early mid February, and it is phenomenal. I need you all to read this. This is Under the Same Stars by Libba Bray, and it is just it talks everything that's happening right now is there's so much that it's just all connected, and I'm gonna ramble to you. This is my pitch of why I think you should read it. Okay, and before I fully jump in to my pitch, uh, this should be mostly spoiler free. I will. It should. Yeah, it honestly might be entirely spoiler free. I haven't fully decided yet. But definitely the first half will be spoiler free, so you're safe. If I go on a mini rant toward the end that is minorly spoily, I will warn you way ahead of time. But you should be safe jumping into this without anything. Anyway, right, phenomenal. Okay, let me ramble and catch my breath slightly. I even wrote notes. Am I going to look at my notes? Probably not. It's fine. It's just the brain. It is what it is. Anyway, Under the Same Stars is a historical fiction book that kind of spans over three different generational timelines, and it mainly revolves around the mystery of three missing kids from back in 1940s Germany and a tree by that is called the Bridegroom's Tree, which is apparently a real tree if you actually look it up. It's a famous tree. And basically, the bridegroom's tree is a tree that people would put love letters in and just other letters in and just try to see if they could find their soulmate or like their future wife, husband, little romantic tree. Um, where's the best place to start for you all? I think let's start in 2020 New York. 2020 New York, you're the height of COVID and you have these two teenagers who are kind of dealing with, high school online, right? And the freaking COVID was awful, right? And we have Miles, and Miles has his two moms. And unfortunately, he's kind of stuck in the apartment alone because one mom is a nurse and it's height of pandemic. She can't really go home. The other mom got stuck out on the travel ban, so she couldn't fly back in. And so he's kind of all by himself during this whole process. And his best friend, Chloe, they weren't actually talking going into the pandemic because teenagers' feelings, it's rough. And so they kind of had a fight and they weren't talking for several months. And then COVID hit and they started connecting and talking again because, yeah, no, that's a lot of people kind of did that during COVID. Anyway, these two kids are very into like mystery podcasts and like things of that nature. And Chloe's grandmother sends her a box that has a bunch of cassette tapes and a newspaper article, and it's talking about these kids that went missing during the 1940s in Germany. And she's like, I wonder, and her grandma was like, she knows, like her grandma was a badass. She was like, oh yeah, like she was in like um all these resistances. She was like a spy. Like she was very fuck the government. Like she was like, she goes, my grandma was a badass. She stood up for what was right, right? So she's always really loved her grandma. She always wanted her grandma to tell her more stories about all the stuff she did. But she kind of never really did that. She always kind of kept that part of her life private. But she did tell her a lot of like little fairy tale stories. And ironically, these fairy tale stories actually are her stories of what kind of happened in her childhood. She just doesn't actually, tell her that. She's just like, there you go, fairy tale stories. Close enough. You'll figure it out when you're older, which it's fine. Anyway, so she asked Miles to help her. She's like, hey, see what you can find out about these kids. We're going to do our own little mystery thing. And he goes, bet. And so they start deep diving. We're going to flash back to 1940s Germany. So it's right before, kind of like right in the early stages of World War II. And we have two girls by the name of Sophie and Hannah. These are two young teenagers they live in this little town not too far from the bridegroom's oak. And Sophie is definitely kind of more of a romantic, whimsical, a little bit more immature for at that age compared to Hana. Hana's definitely kind of maturing, a little bit older. She's a little bit more of an extrovert, a little more brash. And they've been best friends. They live right across from each other. They were only like they were really close in age and all that jazz. And basically, they love to go to the bridegroom's oak and write down their little love notes. And they've been getting replies, and so everyone's kind of been like, "Oh, it's working." But that's a whole thing of how that happens. But anyway, at this stage, when we kind of meet them, they are close, but you can definitely tell there's a little bit of drifting happening in their friendship. We're kind of at the early stages of the war, where things are kind of like you can feel it in the town because there is presence there of the soldiers, because they're all taking camp up in like a castle nearby, and you feel the presence. You kind of know it's there, it's happening, and so there are eyes on the town. Well, they both kind of take a little bit of a different approach to how they see the war, but Sophie's definitely kind of keeping it on the down low because, her father and things of that nature. And Hana is a little bit more like, oh, I'll do anything to help the cause. Well, while they're kind of drifting apart, they do kind of fight and they do end up taking the time apart from each other. And Hana does leave. And then she comes back a while later and she's definitely changed. And she's changed a lot. She kind of sees what is actually happening out there. Why Sophie still really doesn't have a clue. She just knows that a lot of the kids in their town are kind of, playing soldier, or they're leaving and they're not coming back and they're dying or they're going missing. And so they're kind of seeing different ends of the spectrum, right? And so when Hana comes back, she kind of joins or starts the resistance in the town. There's a couple of them that do kind of create a resistance, and they use the bridegroom's tree that Sophie loves so much to kind of aid in their resistance. So that is kind of the little story with those two, and they are the timeline where 3 missing kids from that town go missing on winter solstice. And like I will say, when I was reading it, I felt very clearly I knew how the story was progressing, and I just switched the girls. In all honesty, like I definitely felt like, because we get these fairy tales kind of throughout the book, kind of telling us a little bit of what to expect, and I don't know. I definitely felt like I knew which girl, what was happening, and like what was happening with the 3 missing kids. And I was wrong. But you kind of get those little slivers throughout the book. But that's not all, because we also have over in 1980s Berlin. Yes, these are all connected despite the timeline gap. 1980s Berlin. You have a girl by the name of Jenny who has moved from Texas to I just said it, Berlin. Thank you. So this is right when the Berlin Wall is active and going, right? And so she comes from Texas to Berlin, and she is very much just like trying to fit herself into a box, right? She feels like she needs to, like her mom, she has to like follow what her mom wants her to look a certain way, act a certain way, behave a certain way. And so she feels like she's trying so hard to put herself into a box to make her mom feel better and make like what she's supposed to look like to society. But she's like, it's not working. Like, I'm not fitting into that box. I don't know what to do. And she just angsty teen thoughts, right? And now they move to a whole nother country and she doesn't have any friends. She's just kind of out trying to figure out things. Well, one of the very first people she meets when she moves to Berlin is this girl named Lena. And Lena is definitely punk as can be during the Berlin scene. She's basically living in a warehouse with a bunch of other squatters. And these are all very punk kids. They're all doing like they're all like involved in band and singing and things of that nature. And they're going through and graffitiing everything that they can. They're just being rough, like fuck the government type kids, right? And so she kind of introduces her to what she says is the real Berlin. She's not taking her to, like, she takes her to like 1 or 2 like touristy locations, but she shows her real Berlin. She's like, this is not a paparazzi tourist place. This is my life. This is where I'm living. And so anyway, these 2 girls kind of start meeting up pretty much daily and they're hanging out. And Jenny very much is like, my mom would not like her. My mom would take one look at her and be like, hell no, go find a new friend. And there is another girl that is in the building that her mom has been trying to get her to be friends with. And she's just kind of like, no thanks. I'd rather go with this one. And so she's been asking the other girl to kind of play a little bit like help me out type deal. Um, Not that that goes very well for any of them, but it's whatever. There is, however, that girl does tell her about another woman who lives in the building that they call her a witch. She's very, very convinced she's a witch. Now this woman, they always are, everyone's like, yeah, no, beware of her, don't cross her, like just avoid her if you see her. It is what it is. Well, one day Jenny is walking down and she sees her struggling with her groceries, and so she offers to help. And from then on, it opens the door, and Jenny, kind of out of like what she feels like is like obligation, goes, and this woman tells her a lot of little fairy tales. Like she has all these fairy tales up on her bookshelves, and she talks a lot about them. So she talks about her fairy tales and how she's a psychologist. And so she does go and visits this woman, and that's what they do. She tells her little pieces of the story because they were talking about these missing kids and kind of how this tree, and again, because the tree gets brought up, and actually in this process, the woman gives her a letter and was like, oh yeah, like I would always love to mail this to the tree. And she's like, why don't you? And she's like, well, I don't know, I just never really wanted to, I don't feel like it's the right time. Jenny's like, I'll mail it for you. So Jenny takes it to the post office to send that letter to the bridegroom's tree. And that is kind of how all these are connected. So the lady in the building kind of knows the story and the mystery of what happened that night in the 1940s with the three missing kids, and they're so those that's how those two are connected. And then also, well, there's also another connection which I'm not going to spoil. um but then it's also connected to that, like that is the same mystery that they're trying to figure out in 2020. Oh, I'm out of breath. I forget to breathe when I do these things. Anyway, so that's kind of the characters. That is kind of the story. It's mainly kind of following just this mystery. However, obviously these timelines are kind of very important to note. You're in World War II, and you have all these kids who are kind of getting together, and they're, fighting in what way they can, right? And so they're doing the best to what they know, what they can do, even if it's not really enough to what they feel like. They constantly feel like we can do more, we can do more. Realistically, there are a few kids in this tiny town, right? Just doing the best they can. And then we have the 1980. This one for me was a little bit different, I felt like, because none of what was actively happening in Berlin at this time truly affected Jenny, because she was technically an American who was coming over. She definitely kind of was a little bit of the privileged life. Like, her family's got money. She is just kind of, doing, she's set. None of this is truly affecting her the way it is affecting everyone else who's been living there, right? Specifically the people she's been hanging out with, because the people she's been hanging out with, they have family on the other side, and they've been trying to get together, been trying to sneak people through the wall. And I will say the relationship, so like, Jenny's definitely kind of looking at this as like an outsider. It's not really her problem so much, and that's how she feels like she's dealing with a whole bunch of other stuff, and she's just trying to learn herself, right? And so really kind of the historical aspect of that, she's kind of looking at it more from the outside. That being said, it's not a spoiler or anything at this point. Jenny and Lena, they kind of have a bit of a toxic relationship. Lena is kind of toxic. She is selfish. Understandably, a lot of shit is happening in her life, right? I thought someone was doing something. Anyway, a lot of shit is happening in her life, right? So understandably, she's kind of allowed to be panicky and be a little bit fuck the world. But like the relationship between her and Jenny is definitely a little toxic. She's kind of a little selfish. She doesn't really communicate. She just kind of does things for her benefit. And that, so it's not really that big of a surprise that the relationship kind of just ends. But kind of how everything happens is just a whole nother story. But I get distracted. I'm trying to do this without spoiling it, and I keep wanting to like add my little context. Anyway, that's kind of how that storyline felt to me. Is Jenny was definitely kind of an outsider to what was actually happening. She was kind of seeing like the historical action from a distance. She was there, but it truly wasn't affecting her until she got dragged into it very unwillingly, and she didn't stay in that situation for long. The biggest thing that kind of comes out of Jenny's story, besides seeing that conflict, is honestly, I would have loved to see Jenny's life in a little bit more detail when we were in the 2020 timeline. I would have loved to have seen how she changed and matured and kind of grew into herself between then and now. Um, anyway, but there was the supposed witch in her building that was telling her all these fairy tales. They had a fight and an argument, but before the witch leaves for a while, she does give her a gift. And this gift kind of connects it again to the tree, which again forwards it down to 2020. So obviously, you have these two kids that are trying to figure out the mystery. And so they have actually been in contact with, librarians over there, and they've been looking through all this information, trying to see and sort what is exactly happening. And in real time, they're listening to the tapes. And as they're listening to the tapes, they kind of put everything together. And once they kind of see a picture, they realize kind of the whole what everything is. And honestly, the thing is how both of their families are actually also connected through this tree. It's just a whole nother little thing. I've rambled. I don't know how else not to. I keep talking about it, and I don't know how else to spoil. Like, I don't want to spoil it for you all. Is the thing. So it's been a thing. Let's double check my notes. Have I actually? Is there a way? Well, that's a spoiler, but you can't talk about that. Can't talk about that. I like how I put spoilers in here, knowing I shouldn't talk about them. Nope, that's pretty much without spoiling everything. Yeah. So regardless, if I feel like the way I described it, it feels kind of chaotic. The way that the timeline is actually presented, right? Like the way it is done chapter wise and everything, it flows very well. The writing is very well done. The characters are very diverse and different. And I complained about Lena. I don't think you're supposed to like Lena. Okay. She's not, but the thing is she's not a badly done character. She is a well done character that you're not supposed to really love. You kind of pull for her, but it's just, there's definitely things I'm like, girl, really? But yeah, so you have a diverse characters. The writing is just nice, easy to flow with, easy to follow. And the plot, despite how chaotic I just made it sound, it does flow very well. It is easy to follow. And the little fairy tales that are incorporated in it, I feel like really ties everything together. Because they don't just drop everything at the end for you. Like, you know how some stories, they build everything up and they drop all the secrets at the end? No, the little secrets are kind of scattered throughout the book. And they do a well enough job where I was able to pluck most of the guesses pretty easily and pretty confidently before the official confirmation was given, right? Because like I said, it is a timeline and they are generationally linked, and there's a whole thing with the tree, and it's really, it's so well done. And honestly, I feel like with a lot of what's going on right now, it just kind of all wraps together. I think this book was written in COVID or like right after COVID. And so a lot of people have kind of described it as like, oh, it's optimistically hopeful. It kind of gives hope when you get toward the end. Because it does send Miles kind of down this loophole of, because he's reading about what these girls have been doing, and he's like, I'm not doing enough. Like, I kind of wish I was brave like them. And he goes, I'm not. And it kind of sends him into this whole like kind of thought process of, how do I show my support? And it's brought up that, silence is compliance. Like, that you're not helping. Like, you have made your stance clear if you are just inactive, right? And so he kind of goes, we see the character change with him, of him stepping out of his comfort zone and kind of being a little bit more active in his community, and with just other things that are also happening in 2020, because 2020 was a whole fucking mess. If you all can remember that long, it was 5 years ago. It does not feel like 5 years ago. Anyway, I've still got all distracted. I'm not very good at doing these book retellings for you all. It's just the whole thing. Regardless, it's phenomenal. I need you all to read this book, not just for like the mystery aspect of it is great. Okay, the storytelling part of it is great. The audiobook is phenomenal. Okay, again, I read it and listened to the audiobook, and it's so well done. And the little trinkets that they drop for you to follow along, like the little breadcrumb trail, is so well done. Basically, the overall thing, I feel like the overall encompass of the book talks a lot about how love is resistance, and just do your part. And it's, I just need you all to read it. So that is my spiel. I'm not going to go and do the spoilers because I will over spoil if I do that. I gave it a 4.25. In all honesty, it probably could have gone higher. It probably could have gone a 4.5. I was just being a little bit nitpicky, but it's phenomenal. I need you all to read it. Under the Stars by Libba Bray. The audiobook's phenomenal, or pick up the book. That's all I got. read it. I need more people to ramble about this because I want to talk spoilers, but no one's read it for me to talk spoilers. So that's all I got. I'm out of breath. I need to take a drink of water. So do better than me. Read a book and drink some water. Stay hydrated.